Mideast Realities, a unique half-hour highlighting the real Middle East. It is a program of information that government and media often misrepresent or just don't want you to know. Get the news without bias. Facts without distortion. And most importantly, analysis from the experts. With your host and chairman of the Committee on the Middle East, Mertv Sd. Each week, this program will feature an interview, discussion, or an event to help viewers understand the complex situation in today's Middle East, and especially the realities of U.S. policies toward that crucial region of the world. Mideast Realities.
Welcome to Mideast Realities. I'm Omar Koura, your guest host for Mideast Realities TV. I'm Palestinian, and during the recent Christmas vacation I had the opportunity to visit the Palestinian occupied territories. During that visit I had the opportunity to meet with a couple of prominent Palestinians active in the fields of human rights and political activism. One of those people I have met is Mr. Mohammed Abu Harthiyeh, the General Director of the Al-Haq Human Rights Group based in Ramallah. I spoke to Mr. Abu Harthiyeh extensively about the Palestinian human rights situation, especially after Oslo peace process, and the prospects for Palestinian resolution of the situation in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. This week we'll bring you the first part of the interview with Mr. Mohammed Abu Harthiyeh, and in the coming couple of weeks we'll bring you the concluding parts.
Referring to your question about the situation of human rights today compared to the situation before the peace process and during the uprising. As someone who have worked before the uprising and during the uprising up to date, I could say that before the uprising there were only few people who worked in this field, which was a new field in our society, which is the human rights and the international law. We felt at that time that this issue was not well used and exploited by the Palestinian people, and the focus at that time was only on the role of the PLO and its diplomacy at the international level, although we found that this era is the era of human rights. And as the Palestinian people who lived under the prolonged foreign occupation suffered from all kinds of violations to their rights, individually or collectively, we found that this issue should be given more attention. Al-Haq was established in '79, although I was not with Al-Haq at that time, but I worked with the Palestine Human Rights Information Center. And only 1 year after the establishment of this center, the uprising has started, and we had at that time two roles. The first role was the documentation of all human rights violations concerning the individuals or the collective rights. And because there was a mass of violations to human rights situation in the occupied territories, we found that the first thing to do is the documentation and the reporting and monitoring. The issue of land confiscation, house demolition, curfews, closure of universities, closure of schools, the deportation, the killings, and the arbitrary arrests and the administrative detention were the focus of all human rights organizations. It was not easy to work at that time for human rights activists because it needed lots of field visits, to be in the street with the people, to be close to the victims, and to defend them when they were in hundreds of thousands every day. We felt at that time the danger of being randomly selected by the Israeli occupiers, and there were many human rights activists that were arrested because of their activism in this field. But it has to do with the whole holistic situation of the occupied territories. As sometimes we were caught during curfews, we were caught during confrontations. The Israelis would not differentiate if you are participating in the confrontation or monitoring the Israeli violations to the Palestinian resistance. So it was a difficult period. But at that time, we did not vision that there will be soon a Palestinian society. And there were many human rights violations that we felt it is dangerous, although it was a period of the uprising, the Intifada. For example, the torture of the collaborators, or those who were accused of being collaborating with the Israeli authority, with the intelligence and the Shin Bet at that time. Not just torture, the killing of those people, and the prison conditions where prisoners has tortured some other prisoners, and some of them died. But this was like an alarm for us at the human rights organizations, and this showed that these issues might be a danger if we have a Palestinian state soon. During the Madrid process, our role was to see how a peace process should take place without violating the collective rights of the Palestinian people. Because at human rights organization, our role is not only to foresee the daily violations, but also to see how human rights is affected by international law, how international law should protect human rights. The occupied territories have fallen under the laws of war for 30 years, because the Fourth Geneva Convention of 1949 is the only tool to protect the protected persons by the convention. And there are rights that protected persons have gained as they fallen under the Fourth Geneva Convention. So our role was to see how the peace process would not force the Palestinian negotiators to give up those rights that we have gained. As we know that there was no balance of power between the State of Israel as from the military side, and to the Palestinian Revolution, the PLO, which was at the weakest time of its life. So our role was to send the negotiators our vision to what rights the Palestinian people under international law have gained, what rights we should receive at the end of the peace process. We focused on the annexation of Jerusalem, we focused on the illegal settlements in the occupied territories, we focused on the release of prisoners, and we focused on the right to self-determination for the Palestinian people. After Oslo, the situation have been changing very dramatically and very quickly. The expectations of the peace process have all changed at one time, as there was a delay for the major issues such as water, settlement, borders, refugees, Jerusalem, which are the main issues concerning the rights of the Palestinian people, and this kept the door open for more violations. For example, since the peace process, settlements have been expanding very quickly. Bypass roads have been opened to confiscate more land, and also those bypass roads are used only by settlers and by Jews, so they are discriminative rules. Prisoners continued to be in jail, and more prisoners were arrested. Political prisoners also added to the sum of prisoners, as more administrative detainees were kept for a long time in the Israeli jails. And also the daily Israeli violations that continued when there is confrontation, the illegal use of weapons, the use of force which is not justified by the Israeli soldiers. So this is continued to be as it was during the uprising, although the scale of those violations have been reduced. The other issue is that the Palestinian Authority was not in power after Oslo to protect human rights, because they have obligated themselves to fight terrorism. And as you know, terrorism is not identified even at the international level. What is terrorism and what is not terrorism? What is freedom fighter and what is resistance, or the legitimacy of an occupied people to resist the occupation? So those who continued to see the Oslo Agreement as not the right way to achieve the Palestinian rights, those who opposed to Oslo and who continued to struggle against the occupation were also has to fall victims to the Palestinian Authority and to the Israeli Authority, because the obligations of the Palestinian Authority to combat terrorism have forced them to arrest those alleged by the Israelis to resist the occupation in military or violent way. So this has caused that the Palestinian Authority violated human rights, either because of their obligations or because they want also to impose the authority on the areas that fallen under their control by Oslo. So they have used the political arrest as one tool. Whenever there is any suicidal attack inside Israel or Jerusalem, the Palestinian Authority was forced to take action against the military branches and also the leaders and politicians of those opposition groups. So prisons of the Palestinian Authority were opened to receive political prisoners, and also they have tortured many of the alleged being members of the military arms of those opposition political parties, especially the Islamic movement, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. So now the Palestinians have this schizophrenic, let's say, vision to the struggle. On one hand, they cannot resist the occupation when it comes to the Palestinian obligations, because they would be arrested and chased by the Palestinian Authority. And second, they are asked to combat settlements and expansion of settlements and confiscation of land, so they are asked to resist the occupation. So where is the borders between asking someone, for example, to struggle against keeping the political prisoners in violation to the agreements between the Israeli and the Palestinians, and also when those resistance come to a point that they are illegal to be chased by the Palestinian Authority. So the human rights situation today is so difficult that you have two sides to monitor. The Palestinian Authority with its violations on daily basis to the Islamic movement, the opposition, and also to fulfill its obligation concerning the incitement law, for example, the incitement obligation to fight incitement in the authorities areas, and to combat terrorism and to stop any terrorist acts against the Israelis, and also the continuous legitimate struggle by the Palestinians in areas under the Israeli control, which is called B and C. Our role is to monitor both sides. We see both sides continue to violate human rights. We saw that more agreements between the two sides have caused more complicated situation. For example, the white plantation agreement was the most dangerous to the human rights situation, as it might affect the right to freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, freedom of assembly, because this would fall under incitement. The Palestinian Authority have a responsibility, according to those agreements, to collect the arms from the Palestinian people, as they call them, the illegal arms. And the Palestinian people feel that it is dangerous to hand these arms to the Palestinian Authority at the same time when the settlers are fully armed by the Israeli Authority, and they are using those weapons also against the Palestinians. As we know, many Palestinians were killed since Oslo by the settlers, and the settler violence is daily occurring in areas, especially in Hebron. So these obligations by the Palestinians are not met by obligations from the Israelis. So the Palestinian Authority on one hand is obliged by the agreements to respect human rights and protect human rights, and on the other hand is asked to violate those rights when it comes to their obligations. But the Israelis are not obliged to protect human rights and respect human rights for the Palestinians by those agreements, and they continue to violate them as an occupiers. We see that human rights role is very important still today, and it's even more important in the areas under the Palestinian Authority. And also we added to this role is the role of building up the civil society, building up a democratic society. We are coming soon to a Palestinian state, whether it's on May or after May or whenever it's possible. But during this period we have also an authority which should be responsible for the Palestinians' daily life. We are looking for building up a democratic society, a civil society, which respect freedoms and rights of all its citizens. So we have the beginning of this stage, which is the Legislative Council. We have legislations that should be legislated on daily basis to change all those laws that were imposed on the Palestinian people from the Ottoman regime to the British Mandate to the Jordanian era to the Israeli military orders during the Israeli occupation up till today, which is the gathering all those laws and coming up with a law coming from the Palestinian people, from a decision from our society. So we have a role to also to help building up civil society and the democratization of our society. Thank you. There was always a comparison between the situation in the Palestinian occupied territories and South Africa, and this comparison is always legitimate. On one hand, the Israeli occupation was a racist regime. As up till today, you would find that it is a racist regime when settlers are living in the West Bank, in the occupied territories, who are illegal settlers, and they are treated by the Israeli law. So they are protected with the Israeli law. So the Israeli law have passed the borders of the state of Israel before 1967 to the settlements, which treat them in a different way by laws than the Palestinian people who are controlled by Israeli military orders. And the second thing is that the building up of settlements and spending all this money only for Jews in the settlements is also a discriminative system. And also the discrimination is not only in the occupied territories but also inside the state of Israel borders before 1967. As you know, all the discrimination against the Arab Palestinians inside the Green Line, from housing to health to education to all the services that is given to them, and in addition to this, confiscating their land, their borders, their landscape for the sake of building Israeli neighborhoods. So the whole system, the whole mentality of the occupiers in the occupied territories is the same as a racist regime, as a discriminative regime. On the other hand, the comparison is also legitimate because Israel sees the solution today for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict by leaving those settlements which were built illegally, more than 140, more 150 settlements in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, are placed in between the cities and villages, and as also rings around the cities, especially the city of Jerusalem, which separated the Palestinians from each other, and they are building up only cantons for the Palestinians. So those cantons are similar to the cantons in South Africa. When there was a siege, every time there is a siege on the West Bank, the first thing the Israelis do is set checkpoints on the entrances of those cities and villages, and they separate the people from each other. They separate the city from the villages and the camps, and they separate each city from another city. So they look at a future permanent status where settlements would continue to exist in the West Bank and Gaza, or maybe only in the West Bank, but those settlements would be annexed to Israel, so the Palestinian people would live in cantons separated from each other, so they would be easy to control anytime they want. We feel as human rights organizations that settlements are totally illegal and they should not exist except the buildings of those settlements if they are under the Palestinian Authority. But settlers are illegal to stay because it is in violation to all international law, to all the Geneva Conventions for the protection of civilians under occupation, and also because today the international community have decided that settlements is a war crime, and in the future there would be prosecution for all those who decide to annex areas or illegally confiscate land for the sake of foreign settlers, and they would be prosecuted before the International Criminal Court. So it is still up to date. The international community finds that settlements are in violation to international law, and we see that settlements are also an obstacle to peace. And the future status for the Palestinian state would not be a sovereign state, would not be a state with all the bases of a state if those settlements continue to exist. Because the way the settlements were built, and if you all remember, there were two kinds of settlements called for military reasons and security reasons, and settlements for civilian reasons. Those settlements which were built for security reasons are built on the top of the hills to oversee the cities and villages of the Palestinians, and those who were built for civilian reasons are those who are integrated inside the cities and the villages of the Palestinian people. So on one hand they are inside our populated areas, and they are also on the top of the mountains overseeing and monitoring the situation in the Palestinian areas. So I think the comparison with South Africa is legitimate, and if the negotiations continues on the same track, we feel that it would be in danger to keep the Palestinian people separated from each other, and this would cut the relations socially, economically, and politically, and this would not help building up a real peace. When we speak about the illegality of settlements, we say that there is a legitimacy to struggle against the building up and expansion of settlements. Since Oslo, the Palestinian Authority always declared that those settlements are illegal and they are against them. But this issue was delayed to the final status, which gave a chance to the Israelis to be from one side to continue violating those agreements and to expand settlements. we all know that most of those settlements were built by the hands of Palestinians, and even Palestinians who are today in a leadership position in the Palestinian Authority. What they declare is different from what the actual role they are playing to combat the expansion and building up new settlements and the confiscation of land in the occupied territories. Because if the Palestinian Authority is arresting people who attack settlers, it shows that there is
I'm Omar Kura, your guest host for Mideast Realities. You've been watching the first part of an interview I've conducted with the General Director of the Al-Haq Human Rights Group based in Ramallah in the West Bank in Palestine. I've spoken with Mr. Abu Hathiya, the General Director, about the human rights situation in Palestine and the effects of the so-called peace process on the Palestinian population since 1993. I've also spoken to Mr. Abu Hathiya about the conduct of the Palestinian police and how they have been treating the Palestinian citizens of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Next week we will bring you the concluding parts of the interview. Thank you for watching Mideast Realities, and please tune in next week. Thank you. Bye bye.